So Dillian Whyte is apparently very unhappy at the prospect of Jermaine Franklin receiving the Anthony Joshua fight for April the 1st. I'll be reading a quote from Dillian Whyte from this article on Boxing News 24/7, and I'm going to have to censor myself on a couple of occasions because there is some colourful language, but you'll get the idea. Nevertheless, Dillian Whyte says, "I just want to make some fights, but it's effing frustrating. Everyone was told, all the boxing fans, the winner of me and Franklin fights AJ. So this is a effed up thing. I would have been better off losing the Franklin fight and getting the AJ fight. I know DAZN need content for their subscribers, but why choose to fight a low-key American coming off of a loss instead of having a massive British tear-up? I'm not surprised that they have chosen April 1st for this Battle of the Falls. I faced Franklin, the most dangerous and undefeated version of him, and beat him. Eddie was promising him many millions to fight AJ if he beat me." End quote. So that's what Dillian Whyte has to say. There isn't much to many quotes, but to be honest, I feel like it really speaks for itself. But I'm going to kind of pick this apart because I take issue with a couple of things. Primarily, I feel this is the elephant in the room. This first topic this first point I'm going to touch on is Whyte is correct. Eddie Hearn was public in the lead up to the Whyte Franklin fight, talking about the winner of this fight will go on to fight AJ. And that was really the kind of promotion for the fight because, yeah, Whyte was coming off of a knockout loss, so people wanted to see what kind of shape he would be in his comeback fight. Franklin was seen as somewhat dangerous, but mostly an unknown quantity, so there was a bit of ambiguity or mystique about how the fight would unfold. But probably the main selling point was the winner of this fight goes on to fight AJ. And in the eyes of many people, the majority, probably the vast majority I'd actually say, at least from what I've seen, think that Franklin won the fight. So if you factor in that boxing is largely a supply and demand kind of deal, because it is a business ultimately, yeah, it's a sport, it's an entertainment, we love it, but behind the scenes, it really is a business, and that's what keeps it running. If the winner of Whyte versus Franklin is going to be lined up to fight AJ, and most people view Franklin as the winner, then it's likely that the demand is going to be higher for a Joshua versus Franklin fight. And I know that officially Whyte beat Franklin, but most people don't see it like that. And now I'm not trying to be harsh on Dillian Whyte because ultimately I feel I'm quite impartial in this matter because I actually had Dillian Whyte winning the Franklin fight. Yeah, I saw how Franklin could win. I also saw how it could be a draw. But I personally, watching the fight once through, I had Whyte winning on my card. So I'm not against Dillian Whyte. I had him winning the fight. But that's just me in a sea of people who have Franklin winning that fight. So, you know, it's really... And I know Dillian Whyte's going to obviously fight his case. He wants this fight, which is really... I feel like... I get where he's coming from, but you also have to factor in that myself and most people expect AJ to beat Jermaine Franklin. I think it would be, you know, a fairly big upset if Franklin pulled it off. But for all intents and purposes, AJ should probably win the Franklin fight. But there's still talk of Whyte then going on to fight AJ afterwards in some kind of summer stadium fight. And I understand that nothing's guaranteed, especially in boxing, but, you know, Dillian Whyte still has a chance of getting his shot. Just because he doesn't get it next doesn't mean that he doesn't get it at all. But I do understand that Dillian Whyte's probably feeling the urgency. But ultimately, most people saw him being the loser in the fight between himself and Franklin. So the demand is going to be for Franklin to fight AJ. It's really quite simple, I think. One thing that I also have a bit of I feel like I'm nitpicking, but I do want to point out is Whyte also said that he faced Franklin, the most dangerous and undefeated version of him. As I said earlier, Franklin was in the lead up to the Whyte fight, and even still so now, is an unknown quantity. So we don't really know how high Franklin's ceiling is. He might get better from here on in. where he's fighting more regularly against better opposition and maybe fighting to the level of that better opposition. So I understand that Dillian Whyte is trying to talk himself up. You know, you have to have your own back in boxing. I don't have an issue with that, but in the realm of objectivity, we just don't know if that was, yeah, it was certainly the undefeated version of Franklin, but is it the best? Is it the most dangerous? You could say, oh, maybe there was an element of surprise because nobody really knew what Franklin could do, but there is also the likelihood that Franklin gets better. But, you know, I don't expect Dillian Whyte to actually come out and say that and be honest, because, you know, he's trying to appease his ego, he's trying to big himself up. But one thing I don't think we can ignore is if we cast our minds back about 4 years ago, Anthony Joshua had a 2-fight deal in place to fight at Wembley Stadium in September 2018 and April 2019. He, of course, fought Alexander Povetkin on September 22nd, 2018, defended his titles, and then it was trying to secure an opponent for April 2019. That was the mission. And of course, they went through Deontay Wilder, Luis Ortiz, a whole bunch of names, and even Dillian Whyte. And now Dillian Whyte famously turned down that rematch because he believed he received a lowball offer, and that was £4 million. And that was really the figure being thrown around because famously Luis Ortiz turned that down, even though it was, I don't know, was it like 8 times as much as he had been paid previously? I don't know, something crazy like that, but that's an aside. Whyte rejected the offer to get paid £4 million. But then fast forward to 2022, The Sun reports, and look, some of you may not like the fact that I'm using The Sun as a resource, but it's just to prove a point. The Sun reported that Dillian Whyte earned 5.5 million for the Tyson Fury fight, which was a career high payday for him, according to The Sun. And that's only 1.5 million more than what he was offered for Joshua. And I know I'm saying only 1.5 million. Like, I'm never going to see that money in my life. Hey, look, we can try and manifest it, but for the most part, that's good money. But ultimately, we have to factor in that Dillian Whyte accepted 5.5 million to fight Tyson Fury at Wembley Stadium for one belt, the WBC, on BT Sport box office. Whereas he could have accepted 4 million to fight Joshua at Wembley on Sky Sports box office for 3 belts. So, you know, you take a 1.5 million less, but you have 3 belts you're fighting for instead of 1. And of course, you know, I'm going to factor in all the factors of obviously Dillian Whyte getting knocked out by Povetkin. So that was a setback, although he did manage to get his own back and really he came out on top in that little kind of skirmish, that blemish on his career. But of course, it's gonna almost remind him that he's only got so long in his career. So maybe it got to the Tyson Fury fight and he was just like, you know what, I just have to accept this, so on and so forth. Like, at the time of the Joshua fight, he probably thought as if he could maybe negotiate for a bigger purse or go on to fight for more money against someone else. I don't know. But I think it's just clear, and it was obvious at the time, but even more so now after we've seen how things have unfolded, that Whyte rejected that £4 million offer to fight Joshua because he didn't believe he could win. I think that's ultimately what it was, because at the time Joshua was undefeated and obviously had his 3 belts, was still seen as a force in the heavyweight division, whereas now he's seen as being a lot more beatable, probably the most vulnerable he's ever been in his career. So naturally, people they will want to fight him. Dillian Whyte not being any exception. Now, I'm not trying to say that Dillian Whyte was scared of Anthony Joshua. I don't believe Dillian Whyte's scared of anyone. But you have to imagine that after how the first fight went between Whyte and Joshua, and then how Joshua was looking at the time, He just knocked out Povetkin, and you know, Joshua was in a different stage of his career then, because that Povetkin fight, he was looking shaky early on. He was getting rocked, he was getting tagged clean, looking a bit glassy-eyed, but he had enough resolve and of course enough ability to turn it around and win big. So Joshua, even though he was still having vulnerable moments back then, he seemed like he was a bit more on top than he is now, where he's a little bit down and out. So look, we just have to talk facts. Dillian Whyte rejected the offer years ago because he didn't fancy it. And whereas he fancies it now, he's getting a little bit lost, a little bit caught up in his feelings, because now he probably sees it as a much more winnable fight against Joshua. I don't. Many people who, many objective observers don't. They see a Joshua versus Whyte rematch being even more one-sided, or seeing it as being one-sided, because the first fight wasn't one-sided. They think Joshua wins even more easily. And Dillian Whyte feels frustrated. He feels like he's being slighted because on paper he won the Jermaine Franklin fight, but public opinion, overruling public opinion, he didn't. So look, this is not a Dillian Whyte bashing video. I have the utmost respect for Dillian Whyte because he is the personification of creating success, even if you're not that talented. But if you have a lot of drive and you're willing to back yourself and put yourself out there and put in the graft, you can make life-changing sums of money and, go for your dreams. But just because I have respect for that, I'm not going to disregard facts. And Dillian Whyte's opinion here, this quote from the Boxing News 24/7 article, I disagree with it. But look, that's just my opinion. Ultimately, I'm just a guy making videos, but got to try and stick to the facts and keep some objectivity. So look, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you agree with what I've said? Do you disagree with what I've said? Do you think there's even something I missed out? Leave it down there and I'll get back to you. But for now, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you on the next video.